has a bite.
She's got a bite for sure. She bit Kavita and I both last week.
Oh, jeez.
Hello. Yeah, it's a little moist out there.
Oh, heat, humidity. Hey, this is the last Sunday in August, which could mean September may be a little bit cooler. I don't know.
Thumbs up for cooler weather in May.
Water or ice cream?
No, thank you, Kavita. Well, I speak for myself. I have my own beverage, but maybe Brian does. You're all right?
Okay, so let's get right to our opening prayers. Taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. Taking refuge in enlightened beings, taking refuge in the Dharma realizations that we can have along the path, taking refuge in the assembly of bodhisattvas that are here to help us. All right, here we go. Sangye chedang soki choknam la Jangchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi Dagi shinyen gipe sonam ki Rola penchir sangye druparsho Sangye chedang soki choknam la Jangchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi Dagi jinso gipe sonam ki Rola penchir sangye druparsho Sangye chodang soki chobnam la Jangchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi Dagi jinso gipe sonam ki Rola penchir sangye druparsho. And the four immeasurable thoughts, and this is really stressing the importance of sentient beings for us on the path, because we actually without sentient beings and without having a desire for sentient beings to be happy and for sentient beings to be relieved from suffering, we would never become Buddhas. Buddhas would not exist without sentient beings, in other words. So, we actually depend on our path, we're equally depending on Buddhas or bodhisattvas on the way to becoming Buddhas, and we're equally depending on sentient beings, because without sentient beings, we will never, ever be able to develop our patience, our generosity, our compassion, things like that. It is through our relationship with sentient beings that we are able to move forward on the path to Buddhahood. So that's important to remember, and these four measurable thoughts remind us of this. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And attachment and hatred are two versions of these poisons that in ignorance are called, in Buddhism, that are called ignorance, and then there's attachment, and then there's aversion. And attachment and aversion in all of its manifestations, all of its forms, these are getting us into trouble. The ignorance, the attachment, and the aversion is what causes the suffering and confusion of sentient beings. All right, now we move on to the 7-limb prayer. And if you've done this before, just visualize in front of you an assembly of your guru, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, in the space in front of you. And imagine that you and all of the manifestations that you've ever had throughout beginningless time as a sentient being are there in front, there looking at this assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas as we go through the seven-limb prayer. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends, and turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment, the enlightenment of all sentient beings. And then finally, we have this mandala offering, where we visualize all consciousness and form, whatever you would visualize as the purification of all consciousness and form, working in a completely harmonious, interdependent, interconnected manner. This is what we're headed towards, what we actually have the potential. That is the potential for the existence for all beings. Sajipaki Juchi Meto Tramri Ralingji Nidegen Pati Sangye Jindu Mideu We offer this to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in front of us as we say, Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Nirya Tayam, and for the benefit of all sentient beings. Alrighty, and then we have this.
The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas very happy to accept this wonderful.
Yes, and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are very happy to accept this mandala offering and all of our prayers. Nothing could make the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas happier
Right.
than us just being on this path and taking it seriously, because that's what they're working for. Now we have these two mantra and a prayer that Geshe Nima asked us to recite anytime we're going to be talking about emptiness, and this is definitely what we're talking about.
The online folks may not have this.
Yeah, this is probably not online, so you just sort of listen.
Read the English.
The first is a Sanskrit mantra, an ancient Sanskrit mantra, which is called the essence of causation. And this is how it translates. Those phenomena which arise from a cause, the Buddha has declared their cause, and that which is the cessation of them. Thus, the great Buddha has taught, and may a blessing rest on it. So here's the Sanskrit. Om ye dharma hetu prabhava, hetu tasham tatagato yavadat, hesham cha yo niroda, evam vadi mahashramanana swa. And then stanza 5 from the 18th chapter of Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way. And Nagarjuna was a very great exponent of emptiness, the doctrine of emptiness, or the view of emptiness, which was first presented by the Buddha, and Nagarjuna really filled it out and is still referred to this day as the authority on emptiness. So here's stanza 5. By extinguishing actions and afflictions, there is liberation. Actions and afflictions arise from misconceptions, and misconceptions arise from elaborations. Elaborations will cease through cultivating emptiness. And that's one of the things we will directly be talking about today, the elaborations that arise from misconceptions. So I didn't get as far along with this week as I was hoping to, because we have the flora and fauna around us on the 5 acres is requiring, and the rental cabins and all of that stuff is requiring a lot of our time right now due to this heat dome thing. So I didn't, I just didn't have as much time as I normally have. So normally I like to have at least 6 or 7 typed pages. And we don't always get through that because there's we have lots of discussion. Well, this time I only got barely over 3. So feel free to just ask questions and engage the discussion, because the topic that we're at now, emptiness and the middle way, really requires a lot of discussion and a lot of thought. So feel free to jump in. So just I'll do a little this introduction. I'm calling this part 6 of the wisdom chapter. Is that because he just saw you, Merritt? Oh, she just saw you. Yeah.
Protecting us all.
Little girl, we don't need protection from Merritt. All right. So
Yeah, I forget about, I have some Indian pants, but it's they're almost like not even wearing the
in the previous part, chapter 9, where we were talking about the debate or the discourse between the Chittamatra mind-only school and the Prasangika highest school in Buddhism, the highest philosophical school. Chittamatra asserts the view that external objects do not exist anywhere other than in the mind. And that is actually, that Chittamatra view is actually quite close to the highest view of the Prasangikas. The Prasangikas also will assert that the phenomena that appear to us are actually appearing to us in our mind, in our consciousness. Where the Chittamatrans have made a fundamental mistake that the Prasangikas haven't made is that the Chittamatras assert that consciousness itself is an independently self-existent, inherently existing, truly existing thing, entity. And what that actually means, if you follow that all the way to the end result of what that is actually saying, if anything truly existed completely independently, all that thing could be, that thing could not actually, that entity would not be able to interact with other entities. It would not be able to, because it would be completely independent. It could not depend on other consciousnesses' thoughts or views, or depend on the world around us to influence us. Because what Chittamatra, the mind-only school, is saying is that everything is existing within this completely independent, self-existent mind. All the appearances of our external world are part of this independent, self-existing consciousness. So what that ultimately leads you to is this, what do they call that in Facebook when you're just looking at the same thing over and over again? It's called a what loop? An echo chamber loop. So what that is for Chittamatra, if you follow it through, it just leads to just this sort of this echo chamber of one's own independent self that does not depend on anything else, and therefore is not interacting or interconnecting or relating actually with anything else. Of course, this is impossible. It's impossible because that's not the way things are. And this is what Prasangika is pointing out to Chittamatra. The consciousness cannot possibly exist as this independent self-existing thing. That's not what consciousness is. That's not how emptiness works. That's not what dependent arising is all about. So that would ultimately, for Chittamatra, if Chittamatra was correct, it would lead to a kind of a permanent isolation. And that's, nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. We all understand the value of interacting, being interdependent, being interconnected, getting ideas and concepts from others, being able to interact with the world. That is how things work. And this is all that Prasangika is saying. It's saying, Chittamatra, you're correct. You know, the things things that seem to be the outside world are actually just appearing within our own consciousness and our sense consciousnesses. And we'll get a little bit more into this. Anne Renthal sent me an article, which was an interview with Anil Seth, who is at this point, a world-renowned neuroscience scientist. He's a professor at the University of Sussex in England, and his specialty is neuroscience and consciousness. And he wrote a book in 2021, which was called Being You, something about consciousness, the new kind of consciousness. And that was a bestseller and then made him just world famous. And so it is current cutting edge neuroscience, okay? So his view is very, very close to both the Prasangika view and the Chittamatra view. But where he differs from the Prasangika view is that Anil Seth is saying consciousness is a product of the brain. So in other words, Anil Seth is also falling into what Buddhism would call, what the highest view of Buddhism would call, falling into this sort of trap of thinking it's like the material, the brain, the things, that's what actually really exists, and consciousness is coming from that. It is a product of that. And what Chittamatra was saying is consciousness is self-existent, independently self-existent. And so this is where we all of us have this kind of innate view of things when we're born, when we come out of the womb, we come out of the box thinking things exist inherently. This is the way we think. Things exist independent. I am an independent existing being. The way things appear to us appear that way. It appears as if, to our sense consciousnesses, that everything is, if you look out from wherever you are, you will see all these discrete kind of separate things that are separated by space. And it appears that each one of those separate things, whether it's a sentient being or just some kind of other phenomenon, appear to be unto themselves individual, separate, existing from their own side, and therefore we think that they exist independently. And that's absolutely not the case. So what this is really interesting. What Anil Seth says, the findings of current neuroscience affirm that the world we experience is an active brain-based construction. It is not the world as it really is, whatever that is, you know. But this is what Anil Seth is saying. It's not the world. The world that appears to us is not the world as it really is. It's a brain-based construction. According to Seth, the world as it really is for all conscious creatures is hidden behind a sensory veil. This is exactly what Prasangika and Chittamatra say, but more, we need to realize that Prasangika has in Buddhism has the highest view of things. So our body's senses, which are the antenna that we call eyes, ears, nose, tongue, you know, tactile sense. Our body's senses decode the mix of electromagnetic frequencies, mechanical waveforms, and quantum fields, you know, into the appearance that we have of perceptions and consciousness. It translates those electromagnetic fields, the mechanical waveforms, the quantum fields, it translates those, decodes them, our senses decodes them, and sends those decodings to the brain, which then translates them as the perceptions and conscious awareness of sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, that we identify and label as the external world. Whereas neuroscience is saying that appearance is actually happening internally. This is what
Anything there is appearance.
the appearance is happening internally. This is exactly what Prasangika says. This is exactly what Chittamatra says. This is exactly what Anil Seth says. So they're all in agreement there.
Mhm.
You know, it's funny, I hadn't really appreciated fully the title of one of the books on this topic is appearance versus reality. And it's addressing the,
Yeah.
I mean, of course, in general. Also, just circling back to something you just said, that Prasangika was the highest. One kind of less judgmental way of stating it is that Prasangika is the system that so far logic can't refute their core assertions.
Right. In terms of
All
Buddhist,
the other schools of thought, if you debate on using logic and put it up to intellectual examination, ultimately they can be shown to be off track.
right. And that, I mean, another way of putting it is the Prasangika philosophical view is at the top of the heap in terms of the evolution of Buddhist philosophical thought.
Mhm.
It is where Buddhist philosophical thought has landed, has the final say on it at the present time. Who knows? But I mean, I'm not here to say Prasangika is mistaken, because I can't find a mistake in Prasangika.
Well, I mean, it's sort of,
Yeah.
I think Brian said it well last week, that they have it both ways. So Prasangika has found a very cagey way to
Well,
describe
it's
reality.
called the middle way.
Yeah.
It's called the middle way,
And-
but it is logical, and it's for the reason it's called the middle way.
And then the other comment on what you were just saying is, I was thinking about this the other day when you were sharing what you were reading, that I'm not talking loud for the online people. We totally understand, and so as a metaphor, I think it's quite compelling to think about how our electronic devices, our cell phones and laptops, for example, radios, and old-fashioned TVs. We understand that there are waveforms out there that they are picking up, and based on their programming, they are decoding them into the material that we have become so hooked on.
Yeah.
So for example, if you happen to be hooked on Facebook or God forbid, porn or something, you're basically getting hooked on electronic wavelengths that are beaming, through quote space into a device that then is decoding, and then to make it even more amazing, then your eye consciousness is picking up shapes and light and color,
I organ, yeah.
and then based on your conditioning, eventually translating it into an either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral
Right.
object for you.
So everything's decoding all the time.
And
It's taking
we
the
could-
fun out of most of real life.
It's all just happening.
It's all just a bunch of pixels.
The other more direct way to think about it is, similarly, it's not a big leap to realize, okay, with our physical vehicle, with the physical senses we have, and all the apparatus we have, the neural system we have, that similarly, in the manifest universe, which ultimately, let's just simplistically say, is vibrations of different particles and stuff. And similarly, just like a Wi-Fi or your TV or radio, your sense consciousnesses are tuners picking up that material
Mhm.
and decoding it. And so if you think about what does that mean, it's picking up something. This is why they say this, not that there's nothing. It's picking up something, and then based on both your sense faculties and your conditioning on how to interpret what's arising. I mean, that's what's going on.
Right.
So you can see how the appearance is happening in your mind. What is the material or the content that's out there that's exciting the neurotransmitters to make that appearance?
Mhm.
Right.
And we know we really understand conditioning. We know it's easy because we know from our ability to examine the different sense consciousnesses of other animal and insect species, but you know, we're kind of gonna.
Basically, I mean-
Human is similar.
Anil Seth says that we all have a different appearance
Right.
based on who we are and how we are,
Right.
you know, decoding it and then
Well,
determining what we think about it.
But we're all running different programs.
Mhm,
and
yeah.
Now,
different
the
things.
last thing I wanna add though, and it's, I mean, this is a key thing because we're Mahayana Buddhists, so what does that mean? That means we are studying all this and trying to understand it and trying to realize it so that ultimately our benefit to others can be of the maximum, its maximum potential, namely a Buddha. So it's important to always try to remember in this very intellectual study of stuff. It's important, and I really, this is a real big thing for me because my bodhicitta and compassion and other centeredness is totally sucks. So, I mean, this is like, you know,
Don't mince words, honey.
yeah, I mean, I live in my experience. I know like what destructive it is for me to like cut people slack, you know? Anyway.
I think, do you want a t-shirt? My bodhicitta sucks.
But so so the question sort of tied in on this is how does this
Back off,
understanding
my Buddha
increase our love and compassion? How does this understanding
Right. That's the whole point.
ignite our?
Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah,
Prasangika's whole point and Shantideva's whole point in having this sort of discourse between Prasangika and the other schools is not to point out that they're mistaken. It is because the mistakes are what are causing us suffering. It's all about being free from suffering, about attaining happiness that is completely free from suffering. That's the point of the highest view, not to just go, wow, this highest view is cool.
Hey, if you guys need water and stuff, just please help yourselves.
So
So Tracy asked the question this morning.
uh-oh. I did,
you did? Is it bad?
no,
Oh.
but I don't remember exactly what it was.
All right, so
Well, she-
here you go.
She asked this, does our house really exist if we can't see it?
Like what, like right now, we're not in our home,
Mhm.
so is it there?
It's
Does
not
it
there
exist?
within your internal
Right,
appearance, right?
right,
And so your internal appearance is the decode of your house. And so the decode of your house is not happening for you right now.
right,
So
But it
in that
is-
sense,
It is
sense,
because it's, you have that within you. You're
right,
not looking at it, but
but I
still
can
the.
close my eyes and I can
apparatus,
see.
you
Yeah.
have that
Yeah.
You know, I don't really know the actual answer. to
Right,
this,
right,
but
neither do
I
I.
do know we had this conversation with Geshe.
oh, years ago,
Yes.
Geshe.
And he said, you think your house is there right now, but it's not.
Oh.
And he just left it.
Yeah,
there.
Geshe Drakpa said that.
Exactly, and that's why I brought it up, because I remember having a conversation. with
Well,
him
you know,
about
actually,
that.
here's the whole deal again. I mean, this goes back to this idea of we are surrounded by and going through us are, again, I'll say the electromagnetic frequencies, the mechanical waveforms, and the quantum fields. They are surrounding us, going through us. This is what you could say on one level, the level that the level that scientists have been able to figure out. That's what's actually going on out there, quote unquote, out there. And so everything is being decoded by the particular organism, by the particular senses and sense consciousness of whatever being it is from those frequencies. So in that sense, your house has just gone back to waveform
Right,
for you
for us, yeah,
and for everybody else.
right,
Well,
So-
it's always that.
It is always that, right? And Lama Zopa says in relation to this, Lama Zopa has said that what our sense organs and our sense consciousness, because those are two things that
Right.
are not the same, but they work together. What our sense organs and sense consciousnesses are decoding that appears to us as the external world. What they are decoding is so subtle that it's as if it were an illusion, but it isn't.
right,
But it isn't. Those energies are as if they were illusions, but they're not. Because these are energies, the electromagnetic frequencies, the quantum fields, the mechanical waveforms, they're all energies, you know.
So here's a thought kind of related to what you were saying. So we're talking about all our senses picking up all this subtle stuff coming in. But if nothing exists independently and is dependent arising, we can alter, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we can alter what's coming because we're also participating in the creation.
We can tune into different frequencies.
So that's the being kind or having correct view and learning all this stuff actually affects
Yes.
everybody and enlightenment and all of it when we kind of figure this out, and then it gives us a reason other than just kind of to feel good, to actually alter the appearance of reality.
Yeah.
In the experience of reality.
So, and
Related
the
that.
just, generically speaking, the practice has a purifying effect in the sense that the more you understand, the less attachment, anger, jealousy, greed, all the quote afflictions, all the negative emotions that create this glunk.
Right.
As they are outski, then the appearance to your consciousness changes. And because your consciousness is more purified and seeing a more purified version, then it affects all sentient beings. And in some sense, and we don't even know this in a general sense, when a really light person comes into the room, even just a kind, happy person comes in the room, it shifts it for everybody.
We sense it.
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
So it's not
that is the whole
it's
point.
not just about, is this real, is the house there?
Right.
It fits into this.
So, I think what it helps us do is once we really appreciate the reality of how the house exists, then we can become less fixated
Less
on
attached.
adding,
Yeah.
painting it
Yeah.
and getting everybody spun up on whether or not the door should be swung to the left or the right, and whether we have to, landscape, or if it burns down, we don't freak out, or, all the ways that our attachment.
This is why the Buddha has said that the root of all of these afflictive emotions is ignorance of the nature of the way things actually are.
Right.
If we actually had a realization of the way things actually are, these afflictive emotions, as you've just been saying, would basically disintegrate.
Right.
Because we would no longer grab us the way it grabs us now.
Right.
So short of being the Buddha, if you go back to this idea of dependent origination and causes and conditions, a law of causality, and the ability to change your mind, and so what are the limits of being able to change? Maybe I'm not going to ask this the right way. The external reality that your senses observe. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, sure it does. Because if you think about the way they present what a Buddha is, what an enlightened being is, it's not a being like we are. It is a completely non-material being. That the Buddha can take on material forms if it's going to be of benefit. An enlightened being can do that. But the enlightened beings, like when when you're sort of trying to, in tantra, what the process is you start to visualize what you could become as an enlightened being. And the way they describe it for you is that you're just a being of light. There are no internal organs and all of this kind of stuff going on. It is energetic. And so, yes, then the world that appears to you is going to be a different world. Because you're not using the kinds of senses that we have.
I think I want to directly address a little more directly, I think, because I just happened to be reordered, some more books. Because there's one particular topic, which is in the other room, but it's about the physical world, and this is the.
Oh, those are the ones that, yeah, okay.
Which I,
Volume
this is the other
one,
one, I won't get it, but
All right, let's,
one thing, I'm just gonna briefly say that. The way that they address, how does the how does the. Let's say waveforms, the energies change, do they change, do they change? And in brief, the answer seems to be yes. And what you get in, imagine the entire universe, what you get is consciousnesses of a similar level of,
Knowing, understanding.
density
Hmm.
are, grouping together in various spheres,
Mhm.
creating the appearance. And literally, so as a group, they're sort of generating a similar set of waveforms and similar decoding. But as those consciousnesses elevate or refine or purify, the vibration of the whole system that they're generating collectively is changing.
Yeah.
That's how kind of they're saying.
right, and that
But
actually
I like
explains,
this Christopher when I started reading, like, oh, this is the book Brian would enjoy.
that actually explains
I mean,
things
it's
like
sort of
hell
tedious,
realms.
it's tedious.
How could there be such a thing as a hell realm? We don't see the hell realm.
Right.
We're not of that that particular kind of, you might say, density or vibration. But those who are of that similar vibration are experiencing a different world,
Yes,
a
they
different
are.
world.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's all kind of happening here.
Right, but short of being a Buddha,
Yeah, short of being a Buddha.
so I get the Buddha can do everything.
Buddha
Short
can
of
do
being a
it.
Buddha, can I change your color wall from yellow to blue?
By painting it, you can.
You
No,
probably
no.
can't, but there are, like, some of the advanced yogis, the city yogis, they've learned to, with their mind, manipulate, do all kinds of things.
So that was my question, so what?
Geshe Drakpa had an uncle who could actually, when they had droughts, he would just call him in, and he said you could see the clouds forming and
Yeah.
coming, and it would rain. The guy could do it. He could manipulate things in that way. And there are Geshe Drakpa had all sorts of stories about how people were manipulating things, the same as Lama Zopa has stories like that.
Mhm.
They sound fantastical to us, like that can't be, but I think perhaps if we understood the way the mind, the consciousness, and the energies, all of this works, it might become more logical to us. The closest thing we have in current science is the crazy things that are being found by quantum physics that they have absolutely no explanations for.
So-
The scientists say we don't know how it works, but it works. It's like magic or something.
Right.
But it happens. So, that's as much as I can say, because I don't have the experience of that myself.
But we collectively, as humans, have kind of a view of the way physics works.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're learning new things, but we kind of all agree upon,
And we
how things work,
collectively,
right. But
take
when
on
you
new
can
things.
Move beyond, if you think of that as dependent arising,
Mm-hmm.
if one has the ability to move beyond the way you accept the way our physical world works, then you can shift things that doesn't make sense to our logical physical world, but it's moving beyond.
But it also then it helps others to move beyond as
Yeah.
well.
Yes, yes.
And so it raises the whole thing, yeah.
Right.
It's like, it can be done, but
Okay.
who can do it?
Yeah.
So interestingly, going back to Anil Seth, what he says, what we perceive is kind of like what he calls a reliable kind of hallucination. It's reliable. It's like conventional reality.
Right,
It's
yeah.
conventional. He says it's like a reliable hallucination. He doesn't go so far as to say it is a hallucination, and neither does the Prasangika.
Right.
They don't go so far as to say it is an illusion. They say it's illusion-alike. So this neuroscientist has come to very, very similar conclusions. The only difference is he's saying consciousness. So far, he's having going under the assumption that consciousness is born of the brain, born of matter. And what the reason Buddhism differs with this is that from the Buddha's experience, the Buddha has found that consciousness is not matter. Consciousness, how they describe consciousness is that it's clear and that it's aware. There's clearness, there's awareness. Sometimes they will use the word luminosity. Luminous, it's clear, it's aware. It is not a physical, material thing, but consciousness can embody material things. Consciousness is not limited by matter. Consciousness can embody material things, and so our consciousnesses have embodied these particular kinds of material bodies that are decoding things in a particular way. What Buddhism says is so great about having the kind of body, the kind of human body that we have, the kind of mind, the kind of brain that we have. The brain that we have, the consciousness can work through in a way that it can work with the Buddhist concepts, Buddhist concepts, and we can actually develop and grow and move along a path towards a higher realization of things, a higher enlightened state of being. And that is because we have this particular kind of body with a particular kind of brain, and the consciousness is working through that. An ant can't do that. I think our household pets are close on the way, some of them anyway. I mean, I can imagine some of our household pets can make the shift into being a human. They could do that, but I don't see that happening with something like a wasp or an amoeba or something like that. I don't know. You never know. I don't know. But you can see that there is kind of an evolution of consciousness as it grows, and that would also be an evolution of the form that the consciousness takes. Because consciousness actually, even a Buddha, always takes a form. There's a form.
Right.
Consciousness is formless, but it takes form. To be a benefit, to interact, to work within this dependently arising reality, form helps.
Christopher, I'd like to just add other things I've read by Anil Seth. He doesn't claim to be a philosopher or to have those kinds of answers. He's just trying to study what he can using techniques that are available. And, he just talks, for example, like light perception, that our eyes only detect red, green, and yellow. They only have, the rods that will accept that, but we create all of these other colors in what he calls a controlled hallucination, that there's a stimulus there, but our brain kind of decides through habit and training what we're going to call it. But I don't think he's making claims that the Prasanghikas know something. I think he's saying, I can't answer those questions. They're on a different level from what he can measure.
Of course, he doesn't go there at all. He's not right. I agree. He's not a philosopher. He's a scientist.
Christopher's time.
But I can see the things he's coming up with are so close in some aspects to the Buddhist view.
I'm online. I don't mean to interrupt. I had a little insight. My name is Tony. There's a concept called emergent properties, or an idea, really, a theory that might be a bridge here. For example, if we think about objective reality in terms of emergent properties, what that simply means is you could reduce it all down to waves and particles. But as those waves and particles are perceived, either by an instrument or a mind or by a collectivity, as they are combined, they change. The simplest example would be water is hydrogen and oxygen, but combining it changes it qualitatively. And our reality is, I think, like that as well. It's ultimately reducible down to waves and particles, but as they're assembled and perceived, they change. And our consciousness is probably that way as well. Ultimately, I'm sure it's sparks and amino acids, but and so on. But as our brain, if we want to be materialists, and I'm not saying we should, works, it works in such complex ways as it interacts with reality that we get a very qualitatively different experience from something material. Or to put it really simple, and then I'll be quiet, I'm sorry. I'm just
trying to think about this in some terms that I'm familiar with. The visual experience of the color red might ultimately have a physical, cause in the world and in our eyes and brains, but it doesn't feel physical. And so it feels much more refined. And so our consciousness has maybe grasped it at a certain level, but the way that we think about it is very different. And so in terms of this question about how much change is possible, it seems that we can, with the help of others, move up and down this ladder of abstraction. It seems that the potential's pretty significant. Anyway,
Oh, yeah.
sorry.
No, I agree.
Maybe just restating what other people said. I'm sorry.
No.
It's
That's
actually
good.
great.
It's
Thank
good.
you.
It's good that we're putting these concepts together in ways. So I was just talking about what consciousness is. According to Buddhism, it's not a product of the brain. It can be engaged with the brain and with matter, but it's not born of it. Consciousness is synonymous with mind. The word mind and consciousness mean the same thing in Buddhism. Mind does not refer to the brain. Mind in Buddhism refers to consciousness, and it is an ever-present, ever-flowing, moment-to-moment stream of awareness and clarity, which continuously arises in dependence upon previous moments of itself, which are beginningless. And I mean, a lot of us who have who've been raised in the scientific view have a real problem with this idea of something being beginningless. But we have to ask ourselves why. Why do we have a problem with that? I mean, current science, for years and years and years now, they've talked about the beginning of the universe as this big bang. But Buddhism would say that's fine, but what caused the Big Bang? Something had to come before that to cause it. And so now they're talking about, well, then universes then implode and then they blow up again. But what it's saying is, if you carry this to its limit, you will find that you will never find a beginning. You will never find a first cause of something, because that first cause had to have arisen from something.
But it's the chicken and the egg.
Yeah,
they
it
fall
is.
over
It's like the
again.
chicken and the egg. So according to Buddhism, consciousness is not material, it's beginningless, and it is a product of previous moments of itself that are constantly spilling into the next moment to moment. As we've talked about before, this momentariness in Buddhism is an important aspect of the Buddhist understanding Buddhism. They'll call it impermanence, but impermanence sounds like, oh, something's not going to stay the same. And basically that's what they're meaning. Everything is constantly changing. But impermanence also is very good news. It means this is not going to end. Things can change. And if we direct our consciousness in a particular way, we can change that consciousness, just as you were saying, Marian, for something that's much better, something that is removing the blocks to a happiness and higher awareness. Sort of finding the causes of what those causes are of suffering, and then understanding, oh, all right, then it's just simply a process of removing those causes, and those causes, according to Buddhism, we're going to find those causes in our mind, because that's where everything is appearing to us, as we've been talking about, is appearing, to the consciousness. So the change is to be made in the mind. Again, the consciousness is not made by a creator. It has always existed. It engages in an interconnected, interdependent relationship with everything that it is aware of. And that's what's going on right now. That's what we're doing right now. So Mahayana Buddhism's position is that what they call the middle way. The middle way is the world isn't a projection of our minds, but it isn't completely independent of our minds either. It's sort of like you're saying, having both ways. Well, that's it's right down the middle. There is no fixed reality that is independent of any concept, mental process, or observer. There's no fixed reality independent of any mental process, observer, or concept. That bears thinking about. Rather, there is interdependence. In this way, Buddhism avoids falling into the view of either nihilism, nothing exists, or eternalism, basically saying things permanently exist this way, eternally, forever. It's not going to change. Phenomena arise through a process of interdependent causes and conditions, but nothing exists in itself or by itself. Simply put, no reality in and of itself exists. This is the middle way view. No reality in and of itself exists. Rather, phenomena only exist in dependence on other phenomena. That's how we exist, how everything exists. So in the sixth part of the wisdom chapter that we're getting into, Shantideva is then refuting the lower school's objections to this view of emptiness, and he is establishing that freedom from suffering can only be achieved through a direct realization of emptiness and engaging in the path of the middle way. So now we get into the stanza that we're going to start with. And once again, I will say Shantideva is going directly to sex, which is a very strong, it's a very strong energy that we all have. And it is important to look at it. It's important to understand what's going on. I mean, Kabita mentioned earlier, God forbid that, people are their pixels that they're looking at is porn on the internet. However, it is a pandemic at this point. My experience is that the current generations coming up have access to this a lot.
Yeah.
And it is part of their whole experience now. Very different than when I was little. We had magazines, Playboy. You hide it in the playhouse.
Paper
That's
bags on
Yeah.
the shelves. You
Yeah.
couldn't even see
This
them.
is a quantum leap for this current generation. So this next stanza is very relevant to us right now. All right, so this is the stanza 30, and these are the other schools talking to Shantideva. Even if we know that everything is like an illusion, how will this dispel afflictive passion, afflictive desire? They say magicians may indeed themselves desire the mirage women they themselves create. So apparently back in the 8th century, magicians were creating mirage women and getting attracted to them.
Okay.
But, how different is that actually from, being attracted to pixels on the screen?
Right, exactly.
How different is that?
Yeah.
So the question put forth here by the lower schools is, how can realizing that all phenomena are illusion-like eliminate our delusions and afflictive emotions? After all, a magician who creates the illusion of a beautiful woman can still develop attachment and desire for her, even though he has created her and knows she is nothing more than a mirage. So I'm saying a modern day example of something similar to this is the attachment and desire we can feel for an image of a person or a thing that we see in a movie. I mean, think of all the, the movie stars that you get like, oh God, isn't she beautiful? Or isn't he so wonderful?
Right.
We get attached, and all they are images on a screen. And, when we were growing up, they were images projected on a screen, and now a picture on the internet, We all know that what we're looking at is not actually a real person or a real piece of chocolate cake, for example, yet we still can muster a good deal of attachment and desire based upon a mere image produced by a bunch of colored pixels. So why is that? Why is that? And here's stanza 31. The reason is
Thank you, Shantideva.
they have not rid themselves of habits of desiring objects of perception, and when they gaze upon such things, their aptitude for emptiness is very weak. Their aptitude for understanding that things exist only as dependent arisings and are not actually existing independently from their own side. Our propensity for seeing things that way is extremely weak. When we look at an image of whoever or whatever that we find so attractive or delicious, the tendency in us to perceive that image's lack of truly independent self-existence is very, very weak. Although we realize intellectually that the image is simply a collection of pixels and it's unreal, nevertheless, the object appears to us as if it is real, and because of our instinctive tendency to apprehend that object as being truly existent, we instinctively have feelings of desire for it. So it's basically, we have a habit. We have a habit of everything we look at, we think that thing, like I was saying before, we see everything separate and discrete. We have this instinctive habit of seeing everything as if it existed truly, what they say, truly existed, meaning that it exists, it is independently self-existent, the same way Chittamatra was thinking the consciousness is. We have this instinctive tendency to think that's the way everything exists, so that when we see a picture of somebody very attractive to us on the internet, it triggers that instinctive tendency we have, and that desire just automatically arises. Even though intellectually we know that's just a bunch of pixels, why is that, triggering this desire? It's because we have the habitual propensity to have that happen.
And it's the foundation of our birthing and, I mean, it's how we're all here.
It is how we're all here, right? I mean, this goes to some very actually deep topics. I mean, the monks when they were teaching us about when you die and then you go into this intermediate state, and then you are attracted to something beautiful. And they say very often it will seem like maybe that it's this beautiful garden or this beautiful place, and you're just drawn to this beautiful thing. And what you're actually being drawn to on the level of a human rebirth is a couple having intercourse. It appears as if like some beautiful garden, but you're being drawn by this sexual force back in this tendency to be captivated by it. It draws you compulsively back into another rebirth, or it could be animal rebirth. It could be whatever. I mean, there are all kinds of people are attracted to all kinds of things. I remember Venerable Robina talking about a group of people who call themselves furries. So I looked this up. What is a furry? And it is basically sort of androgynous looking, I think, young men, who are sort of maybe like in their 20s or 30s, and they dress up as furry animals like foxes and bears, and it's a sexual thing, and they have conventions and they take pictures, so you can find it on the internet. It's like, okay, she was not making this up. There are all kinds of things that people and beings can be attracted to and seduced by. The things that would seem crazy to us, things that would, like, for instance, somebody who is completely, totally heterosexual is going to be left cold by seeing a naked male body. It's like a big deal. But they're going to be totally tongue on their foot by a female body, right? And vice versa.
Yeah.
It's like that. But there are all kinds, the tongue hanging on the foot, like, no. There are all kinds of it's an expression. It's an expression for lust. You see it in cartoons all the time.
What cartoons do you watch?
Oh, those old cartoons, I mean, oh well, well, whatever.
Really?
No, there were these, remember, what was that called? What was that called? And then there'd be like, yeah, and then there'd be the very shapely lady, right? And there'd be some animal character that goes, and all these sparks and, hearts come out of his head, tongue hanging on the foot. But the point is
See, we were getting conditioned even by Looney Tunes.
Looney Tunes, that's it. The point is that different consciousnesses can be attracted to all kinds of shit. Look at us today. I have completely lost track of the alphabet. What do you call that? The gender alphabet thing.
Yeah.
There's so many of them I can't keep track anymore. It's like they're just popping up. Everybody is attracted to something different. It's like it shows you the flexibility of our consciousness, and nothing is like actually set in stone. Everything is changeable, and this is not even a judgment. It just is how things are. So in terms of anything like that, we should sort of withhold all of our judgment, and just say this is just a play of consciousness going on here. But we need to understand what it is we're doing. We need to understand our habitual tendencies, that when we see a particular thing that attracts us, triggers this whole process that we go through, which ultimately Buddhism would say something like lust is an afflictive emotion, because it actually winds up isolating you off from anybody who's not going to be part of that lustful thing. Basically, if you think about people, looking at porn on the internet, they're doing it alone in their room. It's a solitary kind of thing that's going on, and like I said, I believe there's a pandemic of this going on right now with younger people,
Hey, so, the point here is it all circles back to your day-to-day as a Buddhist practitioner.
What we are,
Bring it back to practice.
what we're lacking is this view of emptiness, because the view of emptiness is actually the antidote to this mistaken way of seeing things existing inherently. So that's where Shantideva is going with this. So when we see the image of the desirous object, because of our lack of familiarity with emptiness, which is the antidote to afflictive attachment, how can we possibly resist our strong hankering for it? It's as if the object that image represents truly exists out there the way it appears to us. There is no understanding of emptiness in our mind to counteract our fixation on the seemingly real and substantial existence of the thing. However, if we realized that the same object, if we encountered it in our ordinary experience, and not a pixelized one, like a real woman, a real woman is not at all independently real or self-existent either, according to the view of emptiness. And we wouldn't feel an interest in its illusory image or have hopes of involvement with this illusory image. So the emptiness is going to cut through all of it, the correct view of emptiness. So this is what we're getting to here in this chapter, is the view of emptiness. As Nagarjuna says in this thing that we opened up with, the root of disturbing and destructive states of mind, such as craving, is thought that arises from conceptual elaborations. We elaborate. We add on to, conceptually, we add on to what is there that actually isn't there. This is so clear if you're looking at something on the internet. And look how involved we get, drawn into movies. We get drawn in, our heartbeats, we get excited, we get scared, we get lustful. It depends on whatever the movie is, right? And we get totally drawn into this thing, which is just, a kind of a conceptual elaboration. The realization of emptiness gradually eliminates such conceptual thought elaboration and leads to the destruction of ignorance. Finally, the mind itself assumes the nature of emptiness. It becomes without a trace of darkness, so that even the subtlest seeds of ignorance are eliminated, never to return. So now we get into why meditating on emptiness can remove all delusions and their imprints. And these imprints are these, what we've talked about on our stream, our mental continuum, our stream of our mental continuum. We carry these very, very, very subtle imprints of our habitual propensities, the habitual things that we do. That goes from moment to moment to moment to moment, and we carry it with us. And so these become like very, very, very subtle imprints that are on our consciousness. Stanza 32. By training in this aptitude for emptiness, the habit to perceive real things, in other words, to perceive things as if they really, truly, inherently existed, will be relinquished. It will be diminished. By training in the thought, quote, there isn't anything, this view itself will also be abandoned. So, by developing a familiarity, I would say, with the view of emptiness, we will eventually let go of grasping at a truly independent self-existence. And especially, here's a new one, especially by meditating on the emptiness of emptiness, we'll come to let go of the grasping at emptiness itself as being truly existent. So Brian, so many times you've posed this question, but what does emptiness look like? So the reason that question comes up, and it comes up for all of us, it's very tricky, but because our habitual propensity is we are so entrained into seeing things as if they truly really exist, like the cup, the chair, the house, the people, they truly really exist. We don't train ourselves, rarely do we train ourselves in looking at what doesn't exist, looking at the negative. What is the negative? The only kind of people that I'm aware of that do this just sort of in the conventional world, some really, really good artists, they are very aware of negative space. Really, really, really good musicians, very accomplished musicians are very aware of leaving space, because the space itself makes everything more clear. Comedians, another one. Comedians, it's all about timing. When they say something that they know is funny, they pause and they wait and they let the audience get very clear about it, and it becomes extremely funny. And the audience so it's who else is like that? Architects are like this. Really, really good architects. They know the value of empty space, and that empty space actually makes everything more clear. And it brings everything more into focus. Normally what we're doing is we are constantly going, this exists and that exists and this is it, and we're filling up everything with what we would call positive phenomena rather than negative phenomena. Some of us are just completely obsessed with not letting even a moment go by where we don't fill it up with something, because there always has to be something happening, and this is a conventional form of how emptiness, or the negative phenomena, or negative space is the way I always thought of it as an artist.
So the question, I guess, really fundamentally is, how do you know that you have realized emptiness?
Okay, we're going here. Only through developing familiarity and experience with the view of emptiness for a long time will we finally be able to shed all traces of grasping at the ingrained belief in the inherent reality of things. So, in other words, what it's saying here is the view of emptiness is a realization that there is no inherent reality of things. Always they always talk about what is the object of negation. What is emptiness actually negating? There's an object of negation.
Emptiness itself is dependent on there being an object of negation.
Emptiness itself is not a.
Emptiness is dependent.
Is a dependent arising as well. But the object of negation of emptiness is independent, truly inherent self-existence. That is the thing that emptiness is negating. That's the object of negation. And we need to be very, very clear about what that is. It's the object of negation is the important part here. Not like what's emptiness? What's emptiness? What is it? What is it out there? I need to experience what the emptiness is. And we fall into that trap constantly. Because we have the habit.
So sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
and this may be a little off topic, but your comments bring to mind a different situation that society finds itself in today. I have a belief about a certain fact. I believe it's true. And I try to negate its existence as much as I can, but I still believe it's true. And I work hard to say it's not true. And I believe, I don't know, I can drink hydrogen peroxide and that's good for me. But I think, that can't be true. So I keep thinking, well, that's not true, that's not true, that's not true. And finally I convince myself, well, that's not true, but could still be true, but I'm just convincing myself that it's not true. So, you argue that emptiness is kind of, it seems to me the same thing. You're working to negate, and you finally get to a point where I can't negate its existence, so therefore it must be true. But it's only because I convinced my own energy, whatever, that I haven't figured out yet how to negate it, and therefore it must be true. So, it seems to me a bit circular. Seems to me a bit.
However, when we're talking about understanding that nothing exists inherently, independently, what we use actually is logic, actual logic, like what we were just talking about the way we perceive things is actually has nothing to it's not really, there's no reality out there that is the way that the humans are perceiving things. And logically, as a neuroscientist can do, it can take you through the process where you go, yeah, that actually is true. That actually makes sense to me. So this thing, it has to make sense. It can't just be a wish. It can't just be,
okay, but maybe so for example, you have people today who say a belief, and that belief to them is the truth.
That's really is a different topic. That's a different topic. That's not what you're talking about, for example, fake news, conspiracy
No, I'm
theories,
just talking about,
or
it doesn't have to be,
misinformation.
no, I'm just saying a mind, a consciousness, whatever, has a belief about something. Okay?
yeah.
And they believe that is accurate, truthful, whatever you want to, whatever adjective.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
But why, okay, so they're incorrect according to the emptiness
Well,
doctrine, so I guess, but my question is, on the one hand, you have somebody or a individual who says, this is a truth of mine. You have Buddhists who say emptiness is a truth of mine. Okay, I mean, whether I realize it or not, it's a truth of the philosophy of the
Emptiness.
point.
They actually don't say emptiness is a truth.
You need to. I'm going to give you a book. You're assigned in Minnesota.
That's a big book.
Actually, I'll give you.
Oh, you're not going to give him debate.
Yes, because it would really help you a lot. Geshe Nima would be so pleased with you if you understood their method of analysis and logic.
Oh, good
They're
luck,
taking
Brian.
it with you
Good
to
luck, Brian.
Minnesota.
Hey, do you remember those drawings you used to get where it looked like a splodge of painting?
Exactly.
And if you didn't focus, it became a dolphin.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
That helps me. They both exist.
All right,
Brian, that's a gift, a permanent.
let's take some kind of example and just basically
No,
I'll
I'm
use
I'm
myself.
just gonna, Geshe Nima will be so pleased with you if you understand how they debate. This is a book about how they analyze things, and it starts in baby steps, revealing how they address the existent phenomena that we call the world.
Right.
And it would help you so much in all of your questions.
In this idea about belief,
By the way, I don't
believe this,
get it,
believe
but I
that,
know books that
and it is our truth. This goes back to this concept of these very subtle imprints that are on our mental continuum, our consciousness continuum. For instance, I'll just use myself and I won't talk about anybody else. I believe that I am a man. I believe that I have all the parts that a man has, and I know how to use those parts. But according to Buddhism, I could easily, this is because the reason I am that way, and the reason I believe that I am, is that I have had the mental propensity, the habit to be this thing and come into this, to this particular form. However, if Buddhism says there's no reason why I also couldn't be a woman, couldn't be a woman in the future, couldn't have been a woman in the past. It just depends on the habitual propensities that are occurring at the time of birth. So you could have somebody else who says, I am in a man's body, but I'm really a woman. I know I'm a woman. I must be a woman. That's because they, in their own consciousness, and you have to take this view of reincarnation into it. And you have to see that there is actually a logic to it. There's a logic to this mental continuum, and the mental continuum being able to embody different things. So there may have been a strong propensity at the time of the birth to go into this particular set of parents, and it takes a male body, but the stronger, longer propensity, long-term propensity, subtle propensities of that consciousness was that for the most part, they were always being born as some kind of woman. And so they feel like I'm the wrong person in the wrong body. I believe this and this is my truth. But there is, if according to the Buddhist view, you can follow it back and say, well, I can see why that person is saying that. Logically, why that person is saying that. From a Buddhist point of logic. Point of view.
Yeah, I guess I missed, maybe I'm,
No,
That's
I think we
more-
understand your question.
really?
I think so.
What is my question?
Well,
What makes somebody the way they are?
No, that's not.
no, if somebody has a belief and they've convinced themselves that that's the truth versus what other people might believe and feel that
And
that
it's
But I
having to
guess
part with conventional reality,
Right.
you would call them deluded.
Yeah, and
Right.
then Buddhism also talks about conventional reality. We have a consensus.
No, and all I'm suggesting, all I'm asking, not suggesting, is, again, you have a person who has a particular truth,
Mhm.
Right.
particular belief, whatever you want to call it. As a Buddhist, you have a set of particular beliefs, a particular understanding, a particular viewpoint. And you work hard to bring your mind to understand that viewpoint, largely by saying, well, I can't find any way that says this isn't actually correct. I logically challenge this, and I logically come to the point and say, well,
Mhm.
I can't find any reason, evidence, et cetera, that this is not actual
Mhm.
truth, okay? But in doing that process, and maybe, I don't know, maybe this is a bad analogy, but you have people who are Christians, and they go through this long process of studying and belief and learning and questioning, and they come out and say, well, my truth is there is a God, and whatever is associated with that. So I'm asking, how do we say, or how do we understand in Buddhism that that same process that others go through and for different things and yield different answers
Mhm.
is different than in Buddhism than it is in other.
Well, Buddhism would say, for instance, with say, take your example of Christianity. If a person is actually benefiting from that, if they are becoming a better person, if they're morally getting themselves in alignment with same kind of morals that Buddhism would have, basically, they're saying that's a good thing. Different things work for different consciousnesses based on where they are at. Just where they're at. And Buddhism has no problem with anything like that. Buddhism will say, great, that's great. I mean, if this is helping you, it's helping you be a better person, by all means, Christianity is right for you. And even they would go so far as saying that a Buddha or a Bodhisattva could appear as some Christian entity.
Mhm.
Because it is what would be helping that person.
Blah, blah, blah.
So it's very fluid, according to Buddhism, very fluid. It's what is beneficial, what is actually
This
helping.
may or may not relate to your question. But also, very often when we have tried to talk about other religions, the Tibetan monks, when you read that debate book, you'll understand them much better because they're trained to think in a very logical manner, and they don't have a problem with not understanding the philosophy of another religion. Their job is to understand their, what they're trying to understand through what they feel is using logic as a sort of the safety to be not diluted. In other words,
Buddhism would also say if you see a group of people who are espousing a particular religion, and yet what they're doing is they're actually harming others, they're attacking others, they're killing others. Buddhism would say that's not good, that's not beneficial. It's not about the religion itself.
Right.
It's about how is it being used.
And again, we probably should stop discussing this
Yeah.
because I don't think we're getting to the key issue.
so the emptiness bit, I want to just go back to this idea of emptiness.
Yeah, I'm about to get there in the
Really
example.
quick,
Yeah.
feeling, the how will you know question?
I'm about to do
Yes,
this.
okay.
I'm about to do this, Kavita, so don't go there. Okay. Because we have the habit from time without beginning of taking phenomena as being truly existent, we have the strong tendency to think that when we have a direct realization of emptiness, we will have an experience of emptiness as if it were some kind of truly existing thing. We expect there will be some sort of appearance or some sort of experience of emptiness that our mind will be able to positively identify, and we will think, aha, this is emptiness. I've found it. I finally realized it. But according to the great Buddhist meditators and teachers, when one has a direct realization of emptiness, nothing at all appears to the mind. Nothing at all appears to the mind. Take that in. The only thing that is ascertained with definite certainty is the absence of inherent existence, which is the object of negation when one meditates on emptiness. We are negating inherent existence. And the only thing that the mind ascertains is the absence, with certainty, is the absence of inherent existence. There's a common analogy for this that I've heard Geshe Drakpa, Venerable Robina, other teachers use this analogy similar to this. So imagine that you have a particular drawer in your house where you've always kept your keys. They're all where you always keep them. Whenever you put your keys away, you put them in that drawer. Whenever you need to get your keys, you open that drawer and there they are. Now imagine that one day you open the drawer expecting to find your keys, and instead, they're not there. The only thing that occurs is that where you expected to find the keys, instead you found an absence of your keys. Nothing more than that. There are no bells, no whistles, no flashing lights, or a voice announcing, here's the absence of your keys. And because we have this ingrained tendency to think things exist inherently, we expect when we have a realization of emptiness, there's going to be something, lights, something, And what we experience is nothing other than an absence of inherent existence. So this kind of realization of an absence is what is called in Buddhist parlance is a non-affirming negation. Emptiness is a non-affirming negation. It means it's a negation where there's nothing left. Nothing rushes in to take its place. It doesn't affirm anything by its negation. An affirming negation would be the fat boy doesn't eat during the day. Right away, your mind goes, oh, well, what it's saying is the fat boy eats at night. That's an affirming negation. The fat boy does not eat during the day, affirms that, well, if he's fat, he's got to be eating at night. But emptiness is a non-affirming negation. There's nothing that rushes in to take its place. A direct realization of emptiness is a direct realization that there is no inherent existence whatsoever. In realizing that, there is no affirmation of any kind of positive phenomena. Like I said before, our minds are habituated to be constantly thinking of positive phenomena, constantly seeking true existence, which is the opposite of the emptiness of true existence. We are not used to thinking of a negative phenomena that is just a lack of something. This is why we need to do some analytical thinking about the emptiness of emptiness. That emptiness itself is empty of being a truly existing phenomenon. And I think we're gonna we can have some discussion on that now, but we have about 4
I
minutes.
just recall that they say that when you have this actual experience for the first time on the basis of your analysis, that the normal reaction is a little panic.
Right, is there's a
Like
little
if you
fear.
can't find your keys or your wallet.
Right,
Right.
yeah, it's exactly like that. They say you open your
That's
keys
the
expecting
feeling.
them to be there.
You know you
Oh my God, it's not there.
really had a direct realization, but you feel a little sense of panic.
A little panicky.
And the more you do
And,
it, the more comfortable you.
I mean, it even talks about this as it goes further, that some of these other schools are actually afraid of a realization of emptiness. They think they're going to be left with nothing. It will just be nothingness. But all it is a complete lack of inherent independent self-existence of anything. Of
I mean,
anything.
one thing to highlight at this point too is that the whole point of Buddhist practice, you could simplistically say, is to improve our conventional reality.
Yes, simplistically, you
Because
could
we're
say,
going to have some kind of appearance.
whatever we do, it'll have some kind of convention.
Whatever form we take, whatever realm we're in, whatever level of the path, something will be appearing to our consciousness. As Holiness put it, consciousness is
Subjective.
subjective. That is what it is. It's
Mm.
empty of knowing, and its job is subjectivity.
Yeah.
So there's gonna be something.
Right.
So you know, the job then becomes, if you want to put it this way, is, you know, what am I gonna generate?
Yeah.
So, I mean,
On the basis of realizing that it's so changeable.
the key here is to have this direct realization of emptiness, because this direct realization of emptiness is going to make the whole house of cards of afflictive emotions completely tumble. Because afflictive emotions are result because we think things out there exist inherently, and we get bent out of shape when they don't behave the way we want them to behave. I mean, look at relationships. If we actually had a view of emptiness in a relationship, there would not be a problem. Whatever that person is doing is lacking any kind of independent self-existence. It can change, and there's a dependently interconnected relationship you're having with that person, and it can change. But what we do is we concretize these things. We say, you're so and so, you're this way, you're that way, and we make a judgment and say that's the way it is. That's the way it is. They're not going to change. I'm not going to change. When that is going completely against the actual nature of reality, is that everything is changeable. Everything is depending on other things, and therefore can change. It's wonderful news if we think of it correctly, but it's scary if we think that it means we're going to lose something that we're holding on to, grasping onto, you know.
You know, and as on the way, they were trying to grasp this, you know, we keep hearing it again and again and again, and we keep messing with it. But on the way, it would seem that it takes us from a very narcissistic grasping reality, even though we think we're not narcissistic, but everything is me. And then even as a culture or as a city or as a group or whatever, to where we become more aware of the interconnect, you know, that we're all connected, and it brings in that compassion, and it brings in, you know, what I do affects the whole. It brings in the aspiring towards being a bodhisattva because we're all doing this together. It just kind of,
Yeah,
on everyday kind of mundane, how does this translate into what we're doing? It's a much broader awareness of our interconnected with everything because
Yeah.
nothing's separate.
I think you're right on the mark there. I mean, when you said narcissism, that's another way of
We
saying
don't think we're
ego.
narcissistic at all.
Because what basically, if you boil it down, the root cause of this whole samsaric existence of suffering and cycling through it and all the stuff we go through is narcissism. It's the ego. It's ego self-grasping at me and mine. That's the root cause. This is the thing that has to basically ultimately be undone, let go of. It's the thing that makes us angry with one another, upset with one another, makes us, behave in awful ways. All the afflictive emotions that we have result because of this ego self-grasping. And what Buddhism, this view of emptiness is getting at is that's going to go. And I think this is why it can be frightening when some of these meditators have their first direct realization of emptiness. It can be quite frightening because what it's heralding for them is the end of this thing that has been going on since beginningless time, this ego thing, the end of it. And because we're so habituated to this me and mine, it can be quite scary to think, how can I exist without that?
I just had another metaphor popped into my mind, which is jumping out of the airplane with thinking that you have a parachute.
But you don't.
And you panic, but you then realize that there's no ground you're ever gonna hit. So this is your state, a groundless way of being. There is no splat. And so then you're left with, well, what am I, as I'm falling here forever now, what am I gonna do with this?
Yeah.
Sort of grab the other
Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Enjoy the ride, right?
Enjoy the ride, like the magic show. Know it's an illusion, but enjoy it anyway. But
Yeah.
knowing what you're seeing isn't real, I think, is obviously what we're all trying to get to.
Yeah, and not getting sort of caught up in it, being able to see, okay, I can enjoy this, but I know that it's not, I can enjoy this food or I can enjoy this, whatever it is, but I'm not obsessively attached to it,
And knowing that everything arises from this ground, this emptiness, makes me feel like, oh, okay, so it's not actually, well, this is an illusion for me, but I know it's an illusion, that there is something that is there, that everything arises from, that we create whatever our thoughts and stories tell us is real out there. And so we are all connected in that way. And that, I think, is, in my mind, the bit that doesn't change. The ground, the emptiness, which doesn't exist, truly isn't there, but it is a part of us as much as this illusory part is, because that's where it all comes from.
Yeah, it's really hard to put into words, isn't it?
It's very hard to put into words. That's why it's hard to talk about. You have to experience it, right? But
I know, our words are such
experience it, you
finite
have to
things.
talk about it.
Yeah.
And then
Okay, so we have gone past time and we need to say some closing prayers so we can get to our Tibetan class. Good job, everybody, on discussion. I didn't even get through, what I had. I know. It's really, okay, so let's just do.
Trying to be a benefit to you.
Thank you. It was very beneficial. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. What a guy. Okay. Let's see. Let's just do these two ones that the dedication of merit, which is on the same page as the 7 limb prayer. Let's just do these 2 ones because it deals with what we've been talking about, and we'll say them in English. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. May the view of emptiness not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, everybody. All right, I'm going to stop this recording. And then we are going to get to
Oh,
the
I
Tibetan
feel
class.
such guilt about Tibetan 101.
Yeah,